everybody, this is Miss Corey, and welcome to U1-L5, The Rise of Agriculture. So make sure you're following along with your study guide today under the Lesson 5 section. So learning targets. Students can describe when and how human beings began to domesticate wild plants and animals and develop agricultural societies. You're also going to compare and contrast the cultural differences between the hunter-gatherer and early agricultural societies. So your job is you're going to watch this ed puzzle, answer the questions that I'll ask you during the video today will be on blue text, so just answer those on the ed puzzle. And then important concepts in your study guide will be in red text. And of course, questions, email me or come to office hours. All right, so today's a little bit different too. Oh, let me go back for a second. So with the red text, so instead of vocab words today, which I think there's one at the very end, but a lot of them are going to be questions that's in the red text. So if it's in red text, I want you to write the answer in your study guide. All right, so the first question I have for you, so just answer this one on the ed puzzle, is type in what you think hunter-gatherer societies were like and what you think agricultural societies were like. Again, I am not counting if it was right or wrong. Just give your best educational guess. All right, so hunter-gatherers, right? They were hunters, like, duh. So they used stone or obsidian tools. They typically hunted in groups, and they also did do gathering of wild plants. So one of the big things about why mammoths and mastodons went extinct, it was because humans in North America and across parts of Northern Europe and Asia hunted mastodons and mammoths to extinction. So that is not the only case of animals that were hunted to extinction. Some of the other ones include the giant bison, which you can see here. That used to roam North America, including parts of Minnesota. There is also the North American camel. Yes, that's right. North America had camels at one point, but those are also hunted to extinction. The giant beaver, which as you can see is quite giant, and also the giant sloth. So all these super cool animals once roamed, well, could be your backyards, but now are extinct due to humans. So hearths. Hearths are really, really, really important to agriculture society. So humanoids used to cook meat about 1.4 million years. That's probably when they about started. And in order to cook meat, you needed hearths or fireplaces. And those really started about 500,000 years ago. And here's a picture of an ancient hearth, which would cook both meat and vegetables. So let's play a little game, okay? Again, I'm not grading who's right or wrong, but I want you to put in order what plants do you think got domesticated first? So first being the oldest, the last being the newest to be domesticated. So your options are banana, sugarcane, wheat, pea, bean, squash, rice, and corn. Oops. All right, here's the results. Might surprise you a little bit. So, the first thing to ever get domesticated was wheat and peas, actually. And that was in Southeast Asia, about 8,500 BCE. Next up, we got rice, which you might think, China, and that was in 7,500 BCE. After that, we got banana and sugarcane, which actually came from Guinea, 7,000 BCE. And then, of course, what a lot of people who study like North American history called the Three Sisters, that's corn, beans, and squash. That was in Mesoamerica, so in North and South America, about 3,500 BCE. So, next question. Now, this one I want you to start writing in your study guide, is what caused agriculture? So, climate change. That was one of the biggest reasons why agriculture started for humans. So, and you're thinking climate change, right? You're like, oh my gosh, yeah, climate change is happening today, fossil fuels and all that. No, humans were not using fossil fuels back then. It was a natural warming period between 6000 and 2000 BCE. This caused severe droughts in the Middle East, and it also caused excess rain near the equator. So that meant more thick forest, less hunting game, because A, it's harder to hunt game, um, and B, it is harder for like big animals to live in forests. So, how do you think archaeologists and climate scientists know the Earth was warming? You think it's A, counting the rings on fossil trees, B, collecting chemicals found in ice caps, C, diving deep into the ocean, or D, examining desert sand? All right, so the correct answers are actually A and B. So counting rings on fossil trees. So here's like a petrified tree right here. Even though it's petrified and turned into stone, you can still count the rings on it. And each of the rings, as you probably know, so like the bigger the space between the rings means that there is more water. It also can show like the rainfall amount, temperature of how much it's growing, of course, the type of tree. So trees are always really important, especially for archaeologists, and also collecting chemicals found in ice caps on the North and South Poles. All right, so the origins of agriculture. There are um, 5 really distinct places where agriculture occurred independently. So we talked about last time, right? Writing occurred independently. Now we have agriculture that's developing independently. So, of course, right here in kind of the Central Africa region, the Fertile Crescent, which we'll talk more about later. So that's like in the modern day Middle East. We also have China, which we mentioned before, New Guinea, um, and then, of course, North and South America. So specifically here in Mesoamerica, we got the corn, Andes, potatoes, Eastern United States as well. So how does agriculture spread in like human history? So this is really interesting because different continents have different axes in which agriculture actually spread. But it kind of makes sense if you think about it. So let's talk about Eurasia, right? So a lot of the climate is the same going from east to west in Asia. And then if you look at Africa, a lot of the trade routes go north and south. And that's going to be the same deal with also the Americans. So their agriculture spread from north to south as well. So, next question that I want you to write. How did agriculture come about? So when faced with challenges, humans innovate, right? We do it. We all do it. So they selected the best seeds. So one of the biggest ways that you can look at this is with corn, which is something that we're really used to in the United States, especially in Minnesota. So people would select the best seeds, and they would be larger, less bitter, high productive ratios. Also, it would outgrow non-human selected plants. So, for example, before corn was what we imagine as corn, it actually looked like this. So it's a grass, and it's called the tessinti, um, like corn plant. So you can see there's some seeds, but really, it's like, how could you eat this? Um, but then after selective breeding, it would go into more of this offspring here. So you can kind of see now that there's kernels forming. And then, of course, what we know today as corn, or maize, is with the big kernels, and then we dip it in butter and put a bunch of salt on it, and it's great. All right, so once the humans selected or domesticated plant grew, it overtook all the surrounding native plants. So think of corn, right? It's going to overtake anything else that's pretty much in that field. So here's the next question, and this one you just need to answer on your Edpuzzle. But how do you think the growth of towns and cities are linked to agriculture? So it really is a cause and effect of how agriculture and towns were formed. So follow with me on this one, okay? So you got a group of people, okay? So the more people there are, that means the more crops that have to be harvested. And the more crops that have to be harvested, meaning that you need more people to harvest all these crops. And then Because of that, you need more people in your group to harvest the crops. And because you have more people means that you need to have more crops to feed these people. And it's just the snowball effect of going over and over again of like, you need the people, but you need the crops, but then you need more people, and you need more crops. And also, this allowed specialized people to, let me go back real quick. To count the crops, to make trade, to store the crops, to be the ones that actually make the food, okay? You need all those people in society too, just like we have today. So that is how cities and towns grew, because the more people gathered meant the more crops, meant the more mouths they could feed. All right, so other results of agriculture, so make sure you write this down, is that people stopped moving, okay? So we talked about nomads a few lessons ago. That starts stopping. And larger human numbers equals also more protection, not against just wildlife, but also other humans. And larger human numbers also means more genetic diversity. And then, of course, more crops also means more nutrients, right? We know that we can't sit there and just eat corn on the cob all day because we wouldn't get all the nutrients we need. We need a diversity of foods. So let's zoom in on the Fertile Crescent. So if you remember from our mapping game we did a couple lessons ago, this is the Fertile Crescent. So we talked about how it is in the Middle East in what today we call modern day Iraq. We call it the Fertile Crescent or Mesopotamia. It's really like distinguished with these two rivers called the Euphrates and the Tigris. And up here is also Katal Hayuk, which we'll talk about kind of towards the end a little bit more. So again, here's a map of the Tigris and the Euphrates. So these are two rivers, and between them is a lot of farmland for early humans. So what makes the Fertile Crescent fertile? So the Tigris and the Euphrates River. So when a river floods, what is left behind? And yes, lakes can do this too. So the answer to that is going to be silt. Silt is this really fine soil that is left over. So after the water rises and then the water goes down, so all that fine sediment then covers the land, and it is great for farming. So historians really love the Fertile Crescent, especially if you're an ancient historian like I am, but also hate it. The reason why they love it because ancient civilizations are so cool, and there's so much to learn about these early human civilizations. But the problem is the Tigris and Euphrates do not look like the rivers that they were, like 5,000 years ago. Rivers often shift and leaving traces in artifacts underwater. They could be buried deep, and it's very confusing to analyze where cities were, and also how people lived in those cities. So one of the most famous cities is something called Katal Hayuk. And that city, which is right here, I know it's spelled a little bit differently. It depends what language you're going with. It is on the northern edge of the Fertile Crescent, so in Anatolia, which we've talked about in the mapping game, which is in modern-day Turkey. So Katal Hayuk was a city from about 7,000 to 5,000 BCE. And it is really important because this is the earliest known records that a city has ornaments, weapons, tools, mirrors, fine pottery, woven baskets, woolen clothes, and leather. Now let's look in a little bit more into ornaments as well as fine pottery. So you don't need ornaments nor fine pottery in order to live your life. So if you think a little bit more deeply into this, that means these people in Katal Hayuk had the time, the resources, and enough food to employ specialized workers to make these things, although they weren't totally necessary. So here's an example of a statue made. You can see there's a woman sitting on it with two, like wildcats or something like that. You can actually go and see Katal Hayuk today, and it's under this big archaeological dig site. All right, so Catalhoyuk, it was mainly a farming community. It was made of mud brick houses, so you can see here all of the walls to the houses. And together, what was really unique is not only like, you have walls, so, you keep your neighbors out of your house, but they would line up the houses that it would actually make walls forming like a barrier around the city so outsiders couldn't get in very easily. Another really important thing, this is one of the first times that metal is found in human history. So metalworking equipment and stoves were found in Katal Hayuk. So here is a picture of some bracelets, actually. And it wasn't just any metal, okay? We're not just talking about tin. We are talking about gold. We're talking about silver. So things, again, that are ornamental. Those aren't things that you need to live. But the city had enough resources that it would employ people to make these things. And then also copper and lead, which we'll talk about during more of like the Metal Ages and stuff. So, are gold and silver used for weapons and tools usually? No, they're used for ornamentals. So here's a picture of a necklace from Catalhoyuk, by the way. It's pretty cool. Look, it's actually gold leaves. Super pretty. So, copper and lead are also extremely important because these are metals that don't melt super easily like gold does. So they needed to make fires that were hot enough to bend these metals, which again is the first time in human history, as far as that we know, that this is happening. So with the technology in order to bend and shape metals means that there's not much use for stone. So Katal Hayuk is saying goodbye to the Stone Age. But unfortunately, other cities around it aren't quite there yet. All right, so we're going to stop there for today. We'll learn more about metals and how metal really changed human society a little bit later. So today we learned about what caused agriculture, how did agriculture come about, other results of agriculture, and what makes the Fertile Crescent fertile, and also Katal Hayuk. So next up, so you're watching this probably on a Friday or so. That means you're done with this week's stuff. Next week, we're going to start up with U1-L5, the Bronze Age, Babylonia, Anatolia, and Assyria Edpuzzle. If you were in my class, if you want to, please do the weekly check-in. I always love reading them. I respond to everyone. If you have questions, comments, you want to learn more, please email your teacher. Come to office hours. Mine is Monday from 12 to 1. And Mrs. Hinkle's are Wednesdays from 2 to 3. Yeah. Okay. So that is all I have for you today. Thank you for watching. See ya.